Hi, I'm Grant, and I am the Hi Fi Mechanic. Welcome to part 2 of this special video of when we bought a second-hand LP12 on eBay. We found lots of problems, so we'll dive into them now and find out what they were. I absolutely love the LP12. It's so incredibly simple to look at and very, very deceiving. It's the old story that yes, it can be one of the best sounding decks around when set up correctly, but equally it can have very poor results when it's not set up correctly. So I pride myself on being a bit of a perfectionist. I'm a bit dyslexic and very pedantic, and my attention to detail is why I believe that while I was setting up LP12s, they were amongst the best sounding decks in the country. So that's the attention to detail which we plan to put into each of these videos, and you're probably going to see an awful lot of things in our videos which other video makers regarding the LP12 simply either aren't aware of or simply do not realise exist.
Okay, so let's take a closer look at this deck. The first thing that I notice when I lift off the subplatter is this noise. And that tells me that there's no or precious little oil in the bearing housing. It should really sound like this, and that is the sound of a healthy amount of oil in the bearing housing. You know, it is a concern. We don't know how long it's been run in that manner, but we'll take a closer look and we'll see what damage there is. The left-hand image of the bearing shows 3 points of wear or witness marks. This middle witness mark is where it's been riding on the rim of the contact point. At the very tip we have a very small additional point of wear. This outer witness mark is not actually in contact with the thrust pad itself. The point of wear has probably been caused by contaminants within the oil. Despite the size of this crater in the thrust pad, this particular bearing is running really nicely. It's nice and quiet. Spinning the subplatter, there's very little resistance there, so it's actually running really smoothly. So it looks as though in this particular instance we've got away with it. In video 14 of our LP12 tips, we'll be going into far greater detail about the bearing, how it should be cleaned, and a few do's and don'ts. And we'll also be comparing a worn bearing with this particular one, which appears to be in good working order. Although this Basik arm, poor thing, has seen far better days, I think it's a good idea to just take a little forensic look at it. The bearing rattle that you can hear now, and obviously the movement that you can see, is only in the vertical plane. My guess is that this may not in fact have been caused by transit damage. The amount of movement is so great, I honestly think this arm was supplied like that. Depending on if there's any interest, we may decide to create a video on how to re-tighten the vertical bearings to reduce the amount of play. The amount of play that's here at the moment really is almost it's almost behaving like a unipivot. Taking a quick look at the arm collar, the section is obviously broken away. This is more likely than not due to over tightening the grub screw, causing hairline cracks, and eventually this section is obviously broken away. If you take a little look at the bottom, you can see that it appears to be melted, and I imagine whoever was trying to fix it was trying to use heat or weld it together at some point. Yeah, I mean, this sort of issue really can't be fixed. The best solution is simply just to remove the arm lift assembly, which probably will improve the sound a little bit, and you can quite happily use the tone arm without an arm lift as long as you have a steady hand. Because there was only 2 screws holding the MDF armboard in place, it's highly likely that those existing screws were under a lot of stress, and as a consequence may well have damaged the MDF screw threads. So we need to take a closer look at that, and that's one of the things which we'll be covering in video 22, which is all about the armboard. Because the armboard hadn't been correctly prepped, this has resulted in the screws drawing up the fiberboard into this peak, and the end result is basically lack of contact on the sub-chassis. So if we have a look at the sub-chassis with the armboard fitted, you can now see these light gaps where we have an uneven contact area between the 2 surfaces. We noticed that one end of the cross brace wasn't supplied with a large washer. The end result is that the nut has been over tightened, and the cross brace has been pulled or drawn into a concave shape. We've taken a closer look at the top plate, and there's no visible damage of the top plate being drawn in, so it has been over tightened, but not so much as to damage the top plate, which is good news. Fixing this problem will be covered in tip 20. Diving deeper into our LP12 can of worms, we discovered that the subplatter was loose, so we popped it out and took a closer look at the bearing housing, which was the cause of the looseness. And as you can see, the north and south bolts are loose. The west bolt is also loose, but not as much. So after tightening these up and then giving the deck a quick brief setup, so we just got the armboard level with the plinth, and then taking a look at eye level, as you can see here, the platter is decidedly sloping from left to right. Taking a measure to the gap between the platter and the armboard, it's just a tad under 1 mil. This really needs to be closer to 2.5 to 3 mil gap. So this tells us that there's a misalignment between the bearing housing and the sub-chassis. After removing the sub-chassis from the plinth, we could take a closer look at the amount of misalignment, and as you can see here on the left hand side, we have a height of 14 mil, and on the right hand side we have a gap of 11 mil. So we have a 3 mil difference, which tells us that we need to correct this by just 1.5 mil, which isn't necessarily a difficult task. It's just something that you have to do quite carefully. You only get so many attempts at aligning these before you actually damage the sub-chassis. So we do need to be extremely careful. Details of this will be in video 15. We'll just give the top plate a quick seating test. And that sound just tells us that it's not quite seated properly at that point, but we'll carry on around. So it's just this small area which is not quite in complete contact with the plinth, and in tip 5 we'll be covering how to deal with this issue. The top plate has some clear damage to it. Well, damage is a bit of an exaggeration, it's just scratches really, but you can clearly see the subplatter marks very distinctively. They've obviously been caused by the lack of no packaging, and as the deck's been bouncing up and down, the top plate has been marked by the rotation of the subplatter. There's a tiny mark on the edge of the top plate in the bottom right hand corner there, made by the outer platter. I'm not too sure how that's happened, unless it was rotating as someone was tightening a spring up or down, and obviously it then caught on the top plate at that point. It's very unusual to see that actually, but there you go. This deck of ours is obviously full of surprises. Removing these marks we'll be covering in video 5, top plate seating. It's just a little extra thing which I thought would be nice to bolt on there, and no pun intended. And yeah, we'll show you how to restore imperfections or marks on the top plate. Taking a look at the pulley, we have some rubber deposits on there, which is no big deal at all. They can be cleaned off, and we'll be covering that in video 3. But what is interesting is that this particular pulley has a large amount of rubber deposit just on one side, and it's the height of the belt. So I can only conclude that this deck has been sitting on a shelf undisturbed for a long time, many months, or maybe even a couple of years, and the belt has been degrading as it's been in contact with the pulley. So it's just a little telltale sign of what's been going on with the deck. But as I say, in video 3 we'll go through how to deal with these deposits and other aspects of the motor as well.
Now, for each of these individual problems that we find, we are going to have dedicated short videos called LP12 tips to cover each aspect of these particular problems. We're making 25 of these, so they will cover a very wide aspect of everything that can go wrong or may go wrong with a second-hand deck, and we'll go through them one by one and we'll get them resolved for you. Fortunately, we were able to negotiate a bit of a discount with the sellers regarding a lot of the damage, so we received what we considered to be a fair reduction, and that enabled us to buy replacement components to begin to put this deck back to the way it should have been in the first place. Yes, by rights this deck shouldn't have been sold at all because it didn't have a baseboard, and therefore it was illegal, being an electrical hazard. You might say, why did we buy this deck when it was in such bad condition? And the answer is, for your benefit. We want to show you what can happen when you buy a second-hand deck like this, and the pitfalls are literally just the same as buying a second-hand vehicle. Well, in conclusion, we know now that the deck had lots of problems, but they're not unsolvable, and one by one we're going to go through them in individual videos to tackle these issues, and we'll get this bad boy back on the road and working and singing as it should be.
I really appreciate you watching this video. please remember to like and subscribe and ring the bell and catch our latest release the day it drops. Disclaimer: these videos and tips are created for information only and represent the personal opinions, information and procedures of the Hi Fi Mechanic. The Hi Fi Mechanic does not accept any responsibility including damage, loss, injury or death as a result of undertaking your own tests, upgrades or enhancements. We strongly recommend contacting your local dealer for a professional service.